Hi guys, how are you doing? This is WERBUNG and welcome to my full review of the late 2013 Quad-Core Mac Pro. So to get started with this review, I actually want to start out with some of the facts first and then just actually give you just my personal opinion about the machine as well as also my story from what machine I upgraded and just my experience overall with the Mac Pro later on. So to get started, this is the exact entry-level configuration that retails for around $3,000. So this Mac Pro features an Intel Xeon E5 quad-core processor at 3.7 GHz, also has 250 GB of SSD storage, PCIe based, so very fast that is. And then of course also the dual AMD FirePro D300 graphics cards, and these have 2 GB of GDDR5 memory each. The system RAM is 12 GB at the moment, 3 sticks with 4 GB each, but I'm actually planning on upgrading this in the future to 16 GB. But there you just see, right now this is just exactly the stock configuration that comes from Apple for $3,000. So this is exactly what I'm going to talk to you guys about today. And again, this is a review specific for the quad-core version. So the things that I say, or at least a lot of these things, might not apply to the 6, 8 or even 12 core Mac Pro. So definitely keep that in mind. So first, let's actually talk about the design, and especially because this is a machine geared to the pro market, you might say, well, design really isn't the most important aspect, performance is. And I definitely have to agree, but Apple didn't just release another tower that looks like the previous Mac Pro as they did for like the last 5 or 6 years. It basically didn't change in design ever since the Power Mac G5. So now we have a completely redesign, and as you see it behind me, the new Mac Pro is absolutely tiny. You wouldn't even think that there's a high-end machine built into this really small body of the Mac Pro, and just the design overall also with this glossy metal just looks great in my opinion. But then again, of course, there are also some trade-offs that you basically have all the expansion now on the outside externally and not on the inside as you had on the previous Mac Pro. But overall, I have to say the design, at least for me, is great. I think it looks amazing, and honestly I don't really mind the external expansion. So to actually be able to achieve such a small design, Apple developed what they call a thermal core, and this thermal core basically is just one giant heatsink that's in the middle of the machine, and the CPUs as well as also the GPUs are mounted on that, kind of like in a triangle position. And you basically just have one giant fan in the Mac Pro actually on the top. So basically the Mac Pro sucks in the air through the bottom and then actually blows it out over the top. Now, when I first heard that, I was like, damn, there has to be a lot of air coming out. It has to be really hot. And especially for these high-end components, I'm just absolutely blown away by how Apple achieved this, because the machine, even if I'm rendering like long HD videos, never gets really hot. I think the hottest that I've seen it is like 47 degrees Celsius, so not hot at all. And also the fan speed is always around like 700 to 800 RPM, and the best part about it, you can't hear it whatsoever. So yes, if you put your ear like close to the machine, you can hear it, but just from an average distance that you just see perfectly behind me in the setup, it's maybe like 1.50 meters besides me, I can't hear it at all. And it's not hidden somewhere like below the desk. It's on the same height as my desk. So it's incredible that you don't hear it even with rendering videos. And so that's absolutely a big achievement, and I'm very impressed with Apple for developing this thermal core. And also just the heat that's coming out of there isn't hot. And again, it's just completely quiet. And I've never seen this before. My iMac was getting so loud because of all the fans, and just also because of the heat that they had to just cool. And here on the Mac Pro, no issues whatsoever, and just works absolutely fine. So I think this is a big achievement and I'm very impressed. Now, as I mentioned in the design department before, actually one of the bad points about the Mac Pro is that all the expansion has to happen externally now. So in terms of ports, we'll find an audio output for speakers, as well as of course a headphone jack. Then also we'll find 6 Thunderbolt 2 ports, and those Thunderbolt 2 ports are kind of a mixed bag. For me, on one side it's great because each of these Thunderbolt ports actually is also a mini display port, so that basically means that you can connect actually up to 6 displays to the Mac Pro using mini display port or Thunderbolt adapters, or also you can connect up to 3 4K displays. Now, you can only actually hook up 4K displays to the Mac Pro because it has Thunderbolt 2, because 4K at 60 frames per second isn't currently possible on like HDMI 1.4. We still have to wait for HDMI 2 for that. So also, for example, on an iMac that has actually 2 Thunderbolt ports but only Thunderbolt 1, you won't be able to connect a 4K display at 60 frames per second. So that's definitely a big advantage. So either connecting just 3 4K displays or just 6 displays in total is definitely great. But then again, also, of course, you need the adapters. For example, I actually use 2 mini display ports to HDMI adapters, as well as 1 mini display port to DisplayPort cable. And there's also another interesting thing that I found out. You can't use more than 2 mini display port to HDMI adapters. So actually what Apple says online is that you can only connect 2 devices through HDMI. So also if you have this adapter, so basically if you want to connect more than 2 displays, you have to make sure that the monitors at least have DisplayPort, so that you can just get a mini DisplayPort to DisplayPort cable. Now furthermore, we'll find on the back of the Mac Pro 4 USB 3.0 ports, and especially on such a Pro machine, that's not really enough for me, because for example, if I connect my Logitech webcam, my Logitech receiver for the mouse, also a card reader and so on, then basically all the ports are already gone, especially if I connect the 4th port to the printer. So basically, if you buy a Mac Pro, then you also have to spend some money on a USB 3.0 hub. I still have to do that, but that's a good idea nonetheless, because the ports are really not too easy to reach once you've actually set up your Mac Pro. So now we've talked about the hardware and design of the Mac Pro, now let's actually talk about the performance. And if you've missed it, I actually made a completely separate video just covering benchmark results, for example from Geekbench, Cinebench, and also the Blackmagic disk speed test. And basically, if you watch the video, you'll know that I was very disappointed with the performance. So the Mac Pro scores around 14,000 points in Geekbench 64-bit multi-core score. Now, just to kind of put this in perspective, my late 2010 iMac Intel Core i7 2.93 GHz scored around 10,000 points. And also current machines like, for example, even the 21.5-inch iMac with i7 processor, or the just Retina MacBook Pro 15-inch with 2.6 GHz Intel Core i7 quad-core processor, actually, at least in terms of benchmarks, outperform the Mac Pro, which is disappointing, especially if you spend like 3,000 bucks on a Pro machine. So yes, I was very disappointed. Now, a lot of people said, well, you should do just rendering tests and, for example, compare it to an iMac. I know benchmarks aren't really the real world performance all the time, but you just basically would have to have like the 27-inch iMac next to the Mac Pro and then actually compare the exactly same file in terms of rendering speed. So actually TLD today did a great video comparing the real world performance between the 6-core Mac Pro and then also the i7 quad-core iMac. So he actually found out that, for example, in just rendering a video clip, the Mac Pro was actually only like 12 seconds faster than the iMac. So even the 6-core Mac Pro was only 10 seconds faster, or 12 seconds. So you can imagine that the quad-core will probably take the exact same time as the iMac, and that was definitely disappointing, especially because we're talking about Final Cut Pro here. So we're not talking about an Adobe app that isn't optimized yet for the power of the Mac Pro. We're talking about an Apple application that was specifically updated for the Mac Pro to get the optimal performance. So even with this giant update, I think it was Final Cut Pro 10.1, we still don't really see a big performance gain here on the quad-core Mac Pro in comparison to the quad-core i7 iMac. So that's definitely that you probably want to consider if you already have the 2013 iMac with i7 or even the 15-inch Retina MacBook Pro with i7, then probably in terms of performance, the quad-core Mac Pro won't be the best upgrade. So to wrap up the first part of this review, I have to say I was very impressed with the hardware of the Mac Pro. I think the design looks great. Also, the cooling with this one single fan is absolutely amazing. It doesn't get hot. It's absolutely dead silent even when rendering videos. And so that's absolutely impressive. You can connect 6 displays right out of the box, which is also insane. So that's definitely something that I'm very happy about. The speed on the quad-core version I don't think can live up to the hype. I think you really have to go like 6, maybe even 8 or 12 core to actually like unlock the full potential. But then of course you're looking at a lot more money than just the $3,000, which is, at least for me, already a giant amount of money. So for me it wouldn't be an option to just return the quad-core, get a 6-core or even 8-core. It's just that I don't have the budget to do so, and I don't want to spend like my last dime on a machine and then not be able to like get something to eat, to just like put it drastically. So For me, the quad-core $3,000 is absolutely the maximum amount that I'm willing to spend for an editing machine. And if you're just really looking for like the best bang for your buck, also just in the Apple world, then I would assume that maybe even with like the 27-inch iMac or even the 21.5-inch iMac, you're much better suited. For example, I think the 21.5-inch iMac with the i7 processor that I mentioned before retails for around like $1,700. So that's almost like half the price of the Mac Pro, and the rendering performance will be fairly similar. So that's definitely something that you have to consider. Now, it might be that we still have to wait for some optimization to happen, but again, I didn't talk about Adobe apps that aren't optimized at all. I talked about Apple applications like Final Cut that received a major update and still didn't really perform better here on the Mac Pro. Maybe down the road this will change, I'm not quite sure about that. But for now, I think the quad-core Mac Pro is definitely a tough buy. So now let's actually start with the second part of this review, and that's my personal experience with the Mac Pro and also my thoughts about whether you should rather buy an iMac or whether you should buy the Mac Pro. Also, if I want to return the Mac Pro, if I'm just gonna keep it. And first off, when I actually received the Mac Pro and wanted to set it up, it was pretty crazy because I wasn't able to set it up because my Bluetooth keyboard from Logitech wasn't recognized by the Mac Pro. So it turns out that if you have a Bluetooth keyboard, you will need the official Apple Bluetooth keyboard to be able to use it during the boot up. Otherwise, you'll need either a wired keyboard or like one of these keyboards with a small receiver. So I actually had to like search around the apartment to find like this old keyboard with a USB dongle. Otherwise, I would have had to just go to a local store and buy a wired keyboard. So that was kind of a weird moment. And definitely something that you have to consider if you only have a Bluetooth keyboard like I do, that's not the Apple Bluetooth keyboard, then you're probably out of luck and you need a wired keyboard at least once for the setup process. Also something that I mentioned before, you can't connect more than 2 monitors through HDMI, not even through a mini DisplayPort to HDMI adapter. So you need to have at least DisplayPort on your monitor if you want to connect 3 or more displays. But then again, also everything works fine once you have the right adapters and cables, and you can definitely buy them for good price from Amazon. You don't have to buy like official cables from Apple for that. I personally have struggled the past just couple of days. I think I have the Mac Pro for like 10 or 12 days now. So here in Germany or in Europe, you have a law that 14 days after purchase, you can still return the device that you buy online because you weren't able to check it out in the store. So my return window for the Mac Pro closes in like 2 days. And a comparable iMac 27-inch with an Intel Core i7 processor, graphics with 4 gigs, retails for 500 euros less than the Mac Pro, or 400 euros less than the Mac Pro here. So I actually asked myself, shouldn't I return the Mac Pro and actually get the iMac, which basically has a similar performance. I could then also sell one of the displays, I could sell the external webcam, I would get keyboard and mouse even, so all the things that you have to consider. Probably if I sell like even the keyboard, mouse, plus the display, plus the webcam, I would probably have like a price difference of maybe like 600 euros, which is definitely not a small difference for basically the same performance. And of course you also get a 27-inch display with 2560x1440 resolution on the iMac, so absolutely amazing and stunning display. So at least for a couple of days I was really like, yeah, I'll probably just return the Mac Pro and buy an iMac from the money, and just for the spare money I'll buy a TV or whatever. And I actually also had like long discussions on Twitter, for example, with my friend Adam, Mr. Tybox123 about it, and he definitely always says keep the Mac Pro, it's a much better machine, especially for just keeping it like 3 or 4 years. And I can only agree in the end, because especially with 4K around the corner, I mean, we've seen the first display from Dell that retails, I think, for like $799, a 28-inch 4K display. Now, given it's only 30 frames per second, so not really that interesting right now, but we see that 4K becomes a lot more affordable. So if I would just return the Mac Pro, get an iMac, I would be stuck at 2560x1440 for the next 3 or 4 years until I upgrade to a different machine. With the Mac Pro, I can actually connect 3 more of these AUX displays to have like a 6-screen setup, or I could just replace the monitors with 4K displays in the future. And even you can upgrade everything internally. So you can upgrade the CPU. So maybe if the 12-core processor gets cheaper over time, I can buy the 12-core processor. If the graphics card gets cheaper over time, I can upgrade that. RAM, of course, no question, I can upgrade that to 64GB, which is pretty insane. So overall, while the Mac Pro is more expensive, I think for me in the end, as a long-term investment, it's a better decision, even though it doesn't really perform much better than the quad-core iMac, just because, for example, I can just hook up whatever displays I want, and I can just keep the device, keep the Mac Pro fresh, if you want to see it like that. So I would just be kind of worried that if I now get the iMac, I'm stuck on the display for like the next 3 years. It's not a bad display, but when 4K comes around, especially also with 4K capture, for example with the Lumix GH4, which seems to be very affordable and good 4K video, then I think I would regret it in the long term. And just the flexibility to not only edit 4K, but also to just view it on displays, and even to have 3 4K displays, really just kind of convinced me to keep the Mac Pro, even though it's a big investment and even though the performance isn't as good as I hoped. But you're just a lot more flexible in terms of upgrades and also in terms of display, as I now mentioned for like the third time. So this will also end my pretty long review, I assume, of the quad-core Mac Pro. Again, not everything that I said here in this review also applies to the 6, 8 or 12 core Mac Pro. This is specifically for the entry-level configuration. I still hope that you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think about the Mac Pro, as well as also my review and my decision to likely keep the Mac Pro in the comment section down below. I'm eager to hear what you have to say. Also make sure to subscribe to the channel for many more tech videos. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Also check out Tech Century vlogs here on YouTube, where I just post some behind the scenes videos and just some rants that can be pretty entertaining at times. Thanks again for watching, and I really hope to see you next time.